Hello, everybody. Welcome to this video in the series of videos on variable pricing and revenue management. In this, we'll be talking about allocating capacity to segment under uncertainty. So this is a scenario that we're talking about where you have two segments or two or more segments of customers that you have, and some customers pay more, some customers pay less. And so the question you should be asking yourself is, should you be setting aside some capacity for your higher paying customers? Because it happens very often in many cases that lower paying customers tend to use up your capacity much earlier than higher paying customers. Say, for example, you you're selling a plane ticket. So in plane tickets, let's say that you have business travelers and you have regular travelers. Business travelers tend to pay full price even for economy seats, as opposed to leisure travelers who want to pay the lowest possible price for these economy seats. So the question is, do we set aside some of the seats for the business travelers who will come later and pay a higher price? Or should we just let leisure travelers book all the seats at a lower price? And airline companies definitely set aside seats for customers who will end up paying higher prices. That definitely happens. So the question is, what is the trade-off here? How do we decide um, what to do in a scenario like this? How much capacity should we set aside for higher paying customers as opposed to lower paying customers? So the basic trade-off comes down to this: you have spoilage versus spill. That's the trade-off that you see. So spoilage is, let's say that you set aside some capacity for higher paying customers, then and higher paying customers don't actually use the capacity, then you've not then you have some wasted capacity, right? So you have some capacity on hand that you could have sold but you haven't sold. So that is spoilage, where some capacity set aside for high paying customers was not used. So let's say that you set aside 10 seats on an airplane, saying that there'll be business customers who will come and pay full price for this, but it turns out only 8 of them came and paid full price for this. So you have 2 seats that you've not sold that you could potentially have sold to lower paying customers and made some money from. So that's spoilage. Now the opposite end is spill, where you set aside 10 seats for business customers and you've sold all the other 90 seats, but then you have more than 10 business customers who come to you to buy the seats at full price, in which case you are now making less money than you could have made by setting aside more of your seats for business customers. So the question is, where does this balance occur? And so the question comes down to this. So the way you look at it is, so you need to find out what is the extra money that you can make by setting aside one extra seat for a business customer, and then compare that with how likely is it that you'll get a business customer who'll buy that seat. Then you can calculate the marginal revenue for that scenario, and then you compare that to the marginal revenue of selling it to a regular customer, right? So what is the marginal revenue of setting aside an extra seat for a business customer? That is the probability that the higher price segment has a demand of more than the capacity that you've already set aside. So you've decided on 10 seats before. So what is the likelihood that the 11th seat will be sold to a higher paying customer times the price at which the higher paying customer will buy the particular product that you're selling. So that's your marginal revenue of one extra unit. Now, what is the marginal revenue of selling it to the lower paying customer? The marginal revenue of selling it to the lower paid customer is just PL. So if you set aside this whole probability equal to PL and you do some mathematics, you can find that the capacity should be calculated this way. So it's PL over PH. This is the probability of being greater than, but cumulative probabilities are usually calculated as less than or equal to. So you do 1 minus this probability that you'll have, and then of course the demand and standard deviation and so on. So if we assume, so we have no idea how many high paying customers they will be, right? How many seats we should set aside for the high paying customers. So we will assume that the number of high paying customers, so the demand for from the high paying side, follows a certain probability distribution, In this case, we assumed capital F with a demand and standard deviation of capital D and sigma H, right? So let's take a concrete example. So let's look at a particular example and calculate this. Now, so let's say that going back to the trucks example, the two from truck company example that we looked at before. So let's say that you have two segments, A and B. Revenue from segment A is $3.50 per cubic foot, and revenue from segment B is $2 per cubic foot. So this is where you have a company that has acquired 6 trucks, each of which has 1,000 cubic foot of capacity, so 6,000 cubic feet in total. We'll assume that higher paying customers, those who are willing to pay $3.50 per cubic foot, the demand from them is 3,000. On an average is 3,000 cubic feet with a standard deviation of 1,000 cubic feet, right? Now, but these customers want you to have truck capacity available almost immediately, as opposed to segment B customers who are only willing to pay $2 per cubic feet, but they are willing to sign contracts with you much earlier, a week or so earlier. Now, let's say that there's only 2 weeks left over before you have to make a decision on whether you want to set aside some of your trucking capacity for your higher paying customers. If that's the case, you have to decide how much capacity do you set aside for those trucking customers. So to do that, you calculate this ratio, which is 1 minus PB over PA. So PB over PA is $2 over 350. 1 minus that, you can calculate that. And then you can put this into the normal distribution formula with a mean of 3,000 standard deviation of 1,000, and that will give you an answer of 2,820 cubic feet, right? So, I'm sorry, right, 2,820 cubic feet. So you should set aside 2,820 cubic feet if your high paying customers are willing to pay $3.50 per cubic feet, and their demand profile follows a normal distribution with a mean of 3,000 and a standard deviation of 1,000. Now, if your higher paying customers are willing to pay $5 per cubic feet instead of 350, then you should set aside 3,250 cubic feet, almost 500 cubic feet more than what you were doing before. So, and then you can do these calculations this way. So this is assuming that this is how much demand you will have from your higher paying customer. So it doesn't make sense for you to set aside all 5,000 cubic feet because the probability that you will get that sort of customers is very, very low, right? So the question is, where do you cap it? And this is basically where you're going to cap that. And that's the idea. So this is how you allocate capacity to multiple segments. So this is useful when you have higher paying customers who tend to come at the last moment, as opposed to lower paying customers who come much earlier. Should you set aside some of your capacity for your higher paying customers, right? So another good example of this, and I think I talked about this before, was let's say that Xfinity provides internet in a particular neighborhood, and they lay down a high speed fiber optic line, and all the different houses in the neighborhood connect to the same high speed fiber optic line. Now, so let's say that some of the families in the neighborhood have bought a lower price plan as opposed to some. Let's say that there is a family that's running a home business and they've bought a high capacity plan, and they usually want their capacity to be available when customers come to their website, and when that happens, the demand will be higher, but that will be a last moment thing, as opposed to all the other families, all the other people who live in the neighborhood who might be using internet at a continuous rate, checking email, watching YouTube videos and things like that. So that is low priority. So the question is, should Xfinity set aside some of its capacity on the fiber optic line for the higher paying customers, and how much should it set aside at any given point in time? Again, the calculations are done in a very similar way. We calculate mean demand, standard deviation based on the time of the day or time of the week, depending upon how you're looking at it, and then you can calculate how much capacity needs to be set aside, right? Okay, so that's the idea of setting aside capacity when you have multiple segments. In the previous example, we saw how you can change price to figure out when you have different segments, how do you set the price for different segments, and how do you determine capacity based off of that. In this case, we looked at allocating capacity when you have variable, when you have uncertainty in demand, right? All right. So I'll see you all in the next video. Please take care.